Young Roy Cohn tried 3 times to get into the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. He didn't make it, but one result of these attempts to become an Army cadet was that twice Mr. Cohn was deferred from the draft, once in the closing months of World War II and again in 1946. Mr. Cohn said he was not in danger of being drafted at the times he sought entrance into West Point in 1945 and 1946, but Mr. Cohn emphasized that his memory was not entirely clear on this point. Roy Cohn's 18th birthday was February 20th, 1945. We were fighting Germany and Japan, and 18-year-olds were being drafted. New York Select Service records show young Cohn registered for the draft on his 18th birthday. 2 weeks later, on March 7, 1945, Mr. Cohn was classified as 1A, eligible for military service, by his local draft board. But, under the laws then in effect, a young man who had been nominated by a member of Congress for the military academy was deferred from the draft until it was decided whether he was acceptable for West Point. Army records in the Pentagon show that on the same week Mr. Cohn got his 1A draft classification, he was nominated for West Point by Benjamin Rabin, then a Democratic representative representing New York's 24th District. And the New York Draft Board records show that as a result, on March 24, 1945, Mr. Cohn was reclassified to 4B status, meaning that, as an Academy nominee, he could not be drafted. An Army official confirmed that Mr. Cohn originally hoped to start at West Point with the class formed in July 1945. According to the Army records, Mr. Cohn subsequently was rejected as physically unqualified for West Point, where physical standards were much higher than those for draftees. The New York Selective Service files back the Army record, showing Mr. Cohn was 4B, deferred as a West Point nominee, from March 24th to August 5th, 1945. Then he became 1A again, for a while. World War II fighting ended in August 1945, but the draft went on. According to Army officials, a few weeks later, Representative Rabin nominated Mr. Cohn for West Point a second time, this time for entrance with the cadet class to be formed in July 1946. But again, the Army notes he failed to pass the West Point physical. Bearing that out, New York draft files show that young Cohn was classified 4B for the second time from April to August 21, 1946, when he becomes 1A again. The Army records are that Mr. Cohn was nominated for the third time by Representative Rabin sometime in 1946 as a potential member of the Academy class to start in July 1947. In October 1946, according to the Army records, Mr. Cohn's third and last nomination to the Military Academy was withdrawn by Representative Rabin. There is nothing in Mr. Cohn's Selective Service record to indicate he was classified 4B for a third time. Colonel Candler Cobb, New York's Vice Director of Selective Service, said, Mr. Cohn's record shows that he remained 1A after August 21, 1946. His 1A status was appealed in October 1946. I am not allowed by law to divulge why, but it's not important anyhow because we never acted on the appeal. You see, we quit drafting people late in 1946, and the draft went out of existence soon after that. On June 22, 1948, Mr. Cohn registered as a private with the New York National Guard. 2 days later, President Truman signed into law a bill calling for a new draft. Mr. Cohn received a draft-exempt status because of his National Guard membership. A reporter asked Mr. Cohn, at any time that you attempted to get into West Point, was a draft board breathing down your neck? Mr. Cohn said, my recollection is no, but I wouldn't want to say that categorically without checking the records. Ex-Representative Rabin had become a New York State Supreme Court justice. Justice Rabin said, I don't remember the details, but it seems to me I nominated Cohn in 2 successive years. I may have nominated him 2 or 3 times. I don't recall the exact years, but it was between 1945 and 1948, for that is when I was in Congress. As I recall it, Cohn failed his physical at least once. The last time I renominated him after his doctor had told me he thought Cohn could pass the physical if he got another chance. Then, as I recall it, I ascertained that Cohn wouldn't be able to pass the physical, so I called him in and we talked it over and decided to withdraw the nomination. Mr. Cohn's recollection was similar. I had a deviated septum, nasal trouble, you know. That and some other minor ailments kept me out. After graduating from Columbia Law School at 20, he became an assistant U.S. attorney and an expert in subversive activities. In the 1951 espionage trial of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, Roy Cohn persuaded the star witness Ethel Rosenberg's brother, David Greenglass to change his testimony.